just starting to organize out there, very near to Africa.
That's right. And of course, if you follow the map of Africa, it comes around something like this. Now, about right in here is where that French plane crashed in a torrential rain. And it is conceivable, although we do not know for sure, that also may have been associated with the disturbance which is later noted here, and which by this time, on the 2nd of September, had already developed into a very severe hurricane. And on the penetration of the Navy reconnaissance plane on this date, winds were already up to 135 miles an hour.
She grew rapidly once she started growing.
Yes, probably particularly in this area. And of course, no ship reports were reporting to us at this time.
And then the course was just as you show it. Now, in the earlier days of us following the storm, there was every hope that she would actually veer to the north, even east of the Bahama Islands, and stay out in the Atlantic, away from everybody, preferably. Didn't you have reason to suspect she might very well head northward ahead of this time?
Yes, this was our expectation at this time, because in the upper air, that is what we call the middle troposphere and upper troposphere, which to the layman, I should explain perhaps, is in the neighborhood of 15 to 20,000 feet. The upper troposphere is from 20 to 40,000 feet. There was a very strong trough located in here, a trough of low pressure. And of course the circulation of winds around the trough of low pressure is something like this. They come up, and on this side they're southerly. On this side they come down to the trough, and they're from the northwest. So that it appeared to us, since this was very well established and quite strong, that when the hurricane reached this particular area, just to the east of the Bahamas, it would be caught by these southerly winds and taken harmlessly up the Atlantic.
But Donna just wouldn't behave according to the rules.
That's right, and of course with time, changes went on. This trough flattened out and weakened, and then it is our belief that Donna itself, or perhaps we should say herself, helped along her own movement. Because, of course, if you have the storm here, the air is flowing in at low levels, spiraling in toward the center. It rises in the center much as air goes up a chimney. And, of course, the air has to go somewhere, out at the top. So it flows out at the top, and it seemed to build an area of high pressure to the north, which reinforced the easterly winds and helped her to continue going toward the west. And even after that, however, the winds ahead were very light and variable. And actually, we consider that Donna responded to the steering current more poorly than almost any other hurricane that we've ever worked with.
Well, that's a very strange thing, but I would also be willing to say, and I'm sure you'll back me up on this, that you probably have collected more accurate data on this hurricane than on any other one that has come, well, practically than on any other one, period.
You're correct. With the reconnaissance planes of the Air Force and the Navy, the research planes of the Weather Bureau, which are based here in Miami, we have accumulated a tremendous amount of data, which a number of people, at least 5 to 10 research people, will be poring over and working over, and out of which they hope to bring better forecasting procedures which will help us in future years.
Now, there is an important aspect of the situation which I think should be gone into at this time. At the time that the Weather Bureau is following these storms in order to save life and limb in the areas which might possibly be affected, there is also another important piece of work being gone on by the Hurricane Research Bureau of the Weather Bureau. And it is especially going into high gear at the present time, as all of this data which has been collected is being returned to the Weather Bureau. Their job is to correlate this data, analyze it, check into every conceivable known theory as to those steering currents, and in the future time, when we have another one of these babies, much more accurately come to conclusions. Is there any hope of eventually being able to compile enough data, Mr. Dunn, to really hold these things in check as far as knowledge of where they're going to go?
I don't believe, Bill, in your lifetime and mine, perhaps I should say particularly in my lifetime, will we ever be able to make perfect hurricane forecasts in every detail. The thing that we're working toward, of course, is better forecasts, more improved forecasts, and earlier forecasts. Now with this storm, We kept up with it very well, a little ahead of it, but when someone would ask us, where is it going to be 2 days from now? Or when it was out here, where will it be 2 days from now? We had to simply tell them that we really didn't know, or at the most, give them an educated guess with not very much confidence. But we will, we believe, gradually improve. But it's a long, hard, tedious job to come up with an additional 1 or 2% of improvement in the verification of these forecasts.
And there is the part that was so hard to explain to a lot of the people who called in here at WCKT, and I'm sure we're calling in perpetually at the Miami Weather Bureau as well. The hurricane warning area, which was continually extended by the Weather Bureau, covered the area where it would likely, possibly have serious effect within a given length of time, in plenty of time to get those hurricane precautions underway. That in itself is sufficient. We can't guarantee that those precautions you take are not going to be wasted, perhaps. But with the present stage of the meteorological science, that's the best that can be done, and that's a very good best, I think you will agree, after the results here.
Bill, if I might bring something out, on a 360-degree compass, a 10% error in the direction of movement, and we have to admit that we're lucky to be within 10% of the actual direction of movement, that in about 24 hours, with an average rate of movement, we're likely to be off as much as 50 miles in the position of the hurricane. In other words, it amounts to this, that on a 24 to 38-hour forecast, we're really lucky if we're within 50 miles of the exact position of the center of the hurricane.
Well, I'm certainly glad to have that put so clearly and beautifully, Gordon.
Sometimes people just expect too much from us.
I'm afraid that's the case. But they've been, I think, the public has been particularly good in this particular storm all the way through. You pointed out to me that something like 90% of all the people had either gotten to shelters or had left the most seriously to be affected areas after those warnings came out down in the Keys.
That's right, and we have never had such excellent cooperation from the public. And, of course, that credit belongs not only to the Weather Bureau, but to the Red Cross, to Civil Defense, to the news disseminating agencies. And I think perhaps at this time, Bill, that I should express our appreciation, the Weather Bureau's appreciation for the valuable and really necessary work which Channel 7 did in connection with this storm. Because I don't believe that any storm has ever had the radio and TV coverage which this one did, at least in this section of the country.
Well, thank you very much, sir. And, of course, without you, we wouldn't even have gotten off the ground. We wouldn't have done anything other than just sit here and wring our hands. I believe we're ready for some fascinating film, and I mean fascinating film. Just recently, Jack Leverins actually got set to go out there into the center of the eye. The WCKT News sent newsmen into the eye of the Hurricane Donna twice. First, WCKT newsman Dick Ash made the flight aboard a Navy Hurricane Hunter Friday. And WCKT's Jack Leverins flew into the storm aboard an American Airmotive Corporation flying laboratory on Friday. This, by the way, is a civilian outfit under contract to the Department of Commerce, the Weather Bureau. Leverins said he went into the storm 3 times, twice at 14,000 feet, once at 18,000 feet. And this plane is equipped with a gas turbine, the loudest thing I've ever heard, by the way, to supply power for all equipment. At this point, Leverins reported winds of 133 miles an hour on the north side of Donna. He said the flight wasn't as rough as he expected. I can't imagine what he expected. But he did say that flying in the eye is like flying in a bowl of milk. He couldn't see anything but white clouds, which Jack described as beautiful. Gordon, suppose you tell us just the purpose of these hurricane research flights and how they help you in plotting a hurricane.
Of course, as you had indicated a few minutes ago, the purpose of the flights into the hurricane are to gather data, basic data, wind directions and velocities, humidities, pressures, which will eventually be used, in fact, very shortly be used, by the research people in coming up with better forecasting techniques.
I had the opportunity of flying on a rather Pacific flight aboard one of these planes a few weeks ago. Beautiful weather, flew over Nassau, never saw a more beautiful sight in my life. But the thing of most immediate interest was not outside the plane at that time. It was inside the plane. the incredible array of technical equipment which the Department of Commerce Weather Bureau has installed there. I understand that they are actually receiving data in such quantities that it's almost impossible for the human mind to conceive of it, and this has to be sifted out at a later date by all types of computers and calculators.
That is correct. It takes pictures of the photo panels, which of course show what the plane is experiencing. It will take pictures of this on the average, perhaps, that is if we want it that often, of 1 every 5 seconds. It places this on a magnetic tape, and we can bring back literally thousands of observations on just one spool of tape. And then, when we're ready, we can take this, put it through a computing machine, and it can give us all sorts of data. And also at the same time, these electronic machines can engage in computations, say in 5 minutes, do what it would take 10 people perhaps a year to do.
But even so, the massive data is so great, isn't it, sir, that it's probably going to take many months and perhaps many years to really sift out probably all the data even accumulated from this one hurricane.
That is correct. And of course, these data will be supplied university research meteorologists, such as Dr. Reel, whom you met over at the office, formerly with the University of Chicago. In fact, I guess still associated with the university, but currently also doing some work out in Colorado. And scientists at Florida State University, and at Woods Hole, Massachusetts, and New York University, and others, who are all working on this hurricane problem, one joint effort to give steadily improving service. But while these planes also provide us with operational information, don't forget also that it is the Navy and the Air Force with their hurricane hunters, which are still continuing to track these storms day and night and provide us with basic operating information. And also, the Air Force planes stationed at Bermuda are equipped with pods which are attached to the plane, which contain instrumentation, which are also gathering data for research. And then, of course, the radar data gathered by the Navy hurricane hunters are also being used in research.
And, of course, the radar installation at the Miami Weather Bureau as well. Now, that is a monster of a radar installation. That is one of the largest in the country, is it not?
Yes. We believe that this WSR-57, which, of course, we have them now located at points from, Wilmington, Charleston, Daytona Beach, Miami, Key West. There'll be one shortly in Tampa. Also at stations along the Gulf, is the best land-based modern weather radar so far developed.
I think we can prove that right now. Johnny, if you want to come in, and I'll try my best to hold this picture. These are rather precious photographs. These are radar pictures of Hurricane Donna. Now, the one you're looking at right now was taken about 7:30 in the morning, and was just about the time that the hurricane was at its very closest to Miami, about 70 miles. Isn't that right, Gordon?
Yes, that's right.
Go ahead and tell the people, sir, if you will, and perhaps you can look at the monitor off and on as you are watching me to make sure we're not covering up anything here, and explain just exactly how this should be interpreted, at least for a layman.
Now, this black center, this donut hole, it looks like the hole in the donut, is the eye of the hurricane. At times during the hurricane, we could see the Navy the Navy hurricane hunter plane in the center going around and around and recording data for us. This is the wall cloud around the center, that thick white area around. It is under that wall cloud, which on the average is about 15 miles wide, that the strongest winds in the hurricane occur. And at this time, in that small area, winds probably up to 150 miles an hour were occurring. And then you see these spiral bands extending into the center, one here, one here, one here, and you can see them quite plainly. They're the areas of strongest winds and heaviest rain. Perhaps you noted, if you looked out frequently, that the rain would come in bursts. Very heavy rain, very strong winds, then the rains would subside a little bit. And then after a while, you'd get another burst of rain. Well, that was one of these bands passing over. Now, Miami was centered right in here, and you can see one of these large, wide rain bands over it. Now, this was taken at 7 o'clock in the morning, and all of you will recall, especially those who might have been outside or looking outside, the torrential, squally rain that was occurring. Well, that was this rain band working up and around and over Miami.
We have a picture taken just around 12 noon Saturday. Let me hold this so the glare doesn't get too bad, if I can find a way to do it. That way is fine. This was taken when the storm center was right over the city of Naples. So show the storm center, sir, if you will.
Again, this spot right in here, the hole in the donut.
The hole in the donut was right over Naples at that time. This is on a different scale from the previous picture. You can see the spirals are expanded considerably in size.
I believe that this is what we call a 20-mile scale. Now, you may or may not be able to see these circular lines. Those are range markers, and they're 20 miles apart. There's one other thing that I might mention. You'll notice these echoes out here. They're harder and more definite than the spiral bands around the hurricane. These are what we call precursory squall lines, and we got one at Miami, I believe, about 7 o'clock in the morning, 24 hours or more earlier than this. In other words, a short, brief burst of rain, and I believe that the winds got up to about 52 miles an hour, just very briefly, in this first precursory line, and then dropped back to about 20 miles an hour for a number of hours.
Well, thank you very much, Gordon. That covers that beautifully. Let's get back to Wayne Ferris right now.
Thank you, Bill, and Gordon, Don. Pardon me. I found it most interesting, and I'm sure our viewers did, too. I'd been looking forward to that segment for a long time. We've been told, fellas, do we have that film in? Has it arrived yet?
Yes, it's ready.
Well, I have the word now that Bob Walker's film has just arrived into our studios from Tampa. It's been processed, is now edited, up in the control room, and we're ready to see it. So, boys, will you roll it? As we look at this film, we do have some information out of the Tampa area. They got off relatively light, and as you can see in some of these scenes of the downtown area, nothing like some of the areas you've seen earlier today. Tampa had expected the worst and was prepared for Hurricane Donna, as we were here. At least 15,000 persons were evacuated from the beach areas over on the Gulf beaches. Tides of 5 to 7 feet above normal had been anticipated, and 1,300 people were told that they should be housed in Hillsborough High School. As in other areas, much of the damage was broken glass. The suburban areas had floodwaters, and the usual debris, trees and palm trees, were blown and strewn around. This film was shot by Bob Walker, our Tampa correspondent. He flew it by plane, and as we said a moment ago, it just arrived into the studios, was processed, and taken to the control room so we could show it to you before we left the air. The people of the Tampa Bay area were quite fortunate indeed. It was at first thought that the storm would head directly for them and strike the Gulf beaches. And those people over there, it hasn't been too long. Come right on in, Bill. It hasn't been too long since those people in that area experienced some very serious flooding from heavy rains, and I don't think some of those areas could have taken it. We have just called in Bill Ross from the WCKT Weather Center, and on my left over here is Gordon Shaw. We've been talking with Gordon throughout this program. You've seen a lot of him. And then next to Gordon, we have Ron Miller. Just a few of the men that have done such a tremendous job here at WCKT Channel 7 in getting the information to you.
I might mention Charles Baxter, who also did a
yes,
long, steady stroke out at the Weather Bureau.
I was very sorry that Charlie couldn't make it today because he spent a lot of time out at the Weather Bureau, but he was detained, and probably he's home sleeping. I wouldn't doubt it.
He has monster trouble periodically.
Does he? Well, Bill and Gordon, you two fellas spent most of your hours out at the Weather Bureau during this storm. Now, you had a chance to observe these fellas out there and see how they operate and see what goes on. Were you impressed? What's your reaction?
I don't believe that any time since, well, perhaps even the early stages of World War II have I seen the level of dedication on the part of any group of people in my life. Those men take their jobs seriously. They do on a day-to-day basis. But at this time, without any hurry, without any chaos, without any fear, they were doing their job and doing it at their very hardest, with no concern about sleep, with no concern about public credit. And of course, when the television stations try to get their cameras in, and perhaps I'm leaning over their shoulder watching, that constitutes a little bit of harassment to them. Patience, no lost tempers, just marvelous people to work with right from the start. And this goes all the way through. We were either snatching at Les Conover in the radar room who was taking those pictures, such as the one I just showed, or hovering around Wally Davis or Leonard Pardue, or certainly Mr. Dunn himself, and their patience and willingness to get out this information. They understood our problems, sympathized with them. In reality, we had no right to expect that of them.
Yes. They had their hands full, but they were very cooperative, I'm sure. Do you have anything to add to that, Gordon?
Well, I have this to add, that there are many doors at the Weather Bureau with do not enter authorized personnel and so forth, signs like that on them, and yet I have yet to find one door up there that was not made completely accessible to those of us from Channel 7 at any time that we needed information or assistance, personal or technical of any kind. And I personally found that that radar room, from which you saw the evidence of those pictures, was the most interesting and the most informative apparatus. The fact that they could track the eye of that storm as accurately and as consistently from 250 miles out. When it first started to show up on the radar screen as an eye, I know Bill will back me up on this, it was something you could hardly take your eyes away.
I agree. One interruption I must make to amend just one thing Gordon said, because this was after poor Gordon had been on for 40 hours, and we gave him a chance to get something like 40 minutes sleep, and he wasn't out there. As when the storm actually entered into the Florida area and things got very tense, it was absolutely necessary that all press, all television, all radio be kept out of those rooms because of the fact that so much complicated data had to be correlated that additional harassment might have made even a slight error, and a slight error could not be tolerated. So there was a period there, a definite period, when nobody was allowed in those rooms, and completely and rightly so.
But it was made understood, I imagine, just why.
Oh, they were very nice about it.
One thing I noticed, Bill, was the terrific amount of cooperation and coordination between civilian and military people.
Yes.
Because you have Air Force and Navy and the Hurricane Research folks and the Weather Bureau personnel all there together, working just hand in hand all the time.
We could probably sum it up then by saying any rumors, wild or whatnot, that you've heard about weathermen saying they might be strange people. According to you fellas, they're pretty good guys, huh?
Indeed, yes. Dedicated.
Yes.
Really dedicated.
Ron, you've been spending some sleepless hours here. How many all told? Do you know? Have you added it up yet?
I was somewhere about 60, a little more than 60.
I don't know who holds the record around here,
I think
but
that's about it.
I wouldn't venture to take a guess. Do you have anything outstanding in your mind that happened during this storm that you'd like to pass along while we're just more or less having a general bull session here?
Yes, I think two things. One is, while during the night hour, early morning hours especially, we had a great number of phone calls. Our receptionists and telephone operators were very patient with the hundreds of phone calls. We had perhaps thousands. And I spoke with many of the people, too. Almost everyone showed considerable concern, but no panic at all. Then the other thing was, we got one phone call from a man who said he wanted to know how to fix his television set. Every time he tried to watch Channel 7, he had to turn on his electric stove.
Well, thanks a lot for coming in, fellas. We're about to run out of time here, and I just want to mention a few more names. We had Max Moore up in Fort Lauderdale, of course, Zeke Siegel, Ben Silver, Dick Lobo, Jay Wien, Rusty Solis, Dick Ash, and, of course, news director Gene Stroll. It's too numerous to mention.
And Don and Bob.
Right. So without a doubt, the people of Dade County, as far as we're concerned, should be commended for the way they handled themselves through this emergency. With only few exceptions, the residents and tourists alike did take advice of what they were told to do, and they did it. Those who took the necessary precautions came out of the storm with very little or no damage to their homes and property. But the many who refused to listen are now paying, and it'll be several days before we know how much they're going to pay. This is Wayne Ferris, WCKT News.